For centuries, Naboo had been a world defined by diplomacy, culture, and a commitment to peace. But in 32 BBY, this fragile tranquility was shattered. The planet found itself at the center of a galactic power struggle, one that would set in motion the collapse of the Republic and the rise of the Sith. The crisis began when the Trade Federation, under the leadership of Viceroy Nute Gunray, launched a blockade of Naboo. This was no ordinary trade dispute. It was a deliberate act of economic and political warfare, orchestrated in secret by Darth Sidious, the Sith identity of Naboo's own Senator Sheev Palpatine. Under the guise of a response to New Republic taxation on free trade zones, the Federation deployed a massive fleet of warships, cutting off Naboo from the rest of the galaxy. Trade routes were sealed, imports and exports were halted, and communication with Coruscant was heavily restricted. While the blockade was meant to be a show of force, its true purpose was far more sinister. Palpatine, manipulating events from behind the scenes, used the crisis to turn public sympathy toward himself while simultaneously discrediting the Republic Senate. As Naboo's situation worsened, Queen Padme Amidala, the newly elected teenage monarch, attempted to resolve the issue through diplomatic channels. However, the Republic Senate, bogged down in bureaucracy and corruption, failed to act. Instead of immediate intervention, the crisis was endlessly debated in committees, leaving Naboo isolated and vulnerable. With no resistance from the Republic, the Trade Federation escalated their aggression, moving from blockade to full-scale invasion. The Federation deployed vast legions of battle droids, led by commanders like UOM-9, who quickly overran Naboo's defenses. The capital city of Theed fell within hours. Despite the bravery of the Royal Naboo security forces, their outdated weaponry and limited numbers were no match for the relentless droid army. Naboo's famed N-1 starfighters were unable to mount a significant defense, as the Federation's warships maintained orbital control and shut down the planet's spaceports. The Naboo military had been intentionally limited for generations, relying on diplomacy rather than warfare, a weakness the Trade Federation ruthlessly exploited. With Theed occupied, Viceroy Gunray placed the Queen and her advisors under arrest, demanding that she sign a treaty legitimizing the invasion. The treaty would give the Federation full control over Naboo's plasma resources, while the Senate would be forced to recognize their authority. However, Amidala refused, knowing that signing the treaty would forever place Naboo under the Federation's rule. As the situation grew more desperate, the Republic finally responded, but not with a military force. Instead, Supreme Chancellor Finis Valorum secretly dispatched 2 Jedi ambassadors, Qui-Gon Jinn and his Padawan Obi-Wan Kenobi, to negotiate a resolution. When the Jedi arrived, however, the Trade Federation refused diplomacy. On the orders of Darth Sidious, they attempted to assassinate the Jedi, sending battle droids to eliminate them before negotiations could begin. Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan survived the attempt on their lives and escaped to the surface of Naboo, where they witnessed firsthand the horrors of the invasion. Recognizing that Queen Amidala was in imminent danger, the Jedi infiltrated Theed and rescued her from captivity, along with Captain Quarsh Panaka and a small group of Naboo resistance fighters. Knowing that Naboo's only hope lay in appealing directly to the Republic Senate, they escaped the planet, evading Trade Federation patrols in the Royal Starship. Their journey was fraught with danger. The ship suffered damage while running the blockade, forcing them to make an emergency landing on Tatooine. There, the Queen, disguised as one of her handmaidens, encountered a young slave boy named Anakin Skywalker, whose extraordinary piloting skills and force sensitivity led Qui-Gon Jinn to believe he was the prophesied chosen one. Meanwhile, back on Naboo, the situation grew worse by the day. The Trade Federation tightened its grip, establishing prison camps for those who resisted. While much of the human population suffered under the occupation, the Gungans had retreated deep into their underwater sanctuaries, avoiding direct conflict. However, tensions between the two peoples meant that there was little cooperation against their common enemy. When Queen Amidala finally reached Coruscant, she pleaded with the Galactic Senate to take action against the Federation's illegal invasion. However, corruption and political stagnation had paralyzed the Republic. Senator Palpatine, pretending to be Naboo's loyal representative, manipulated the Queen into calling for a vote of no confidence against Chancellor Valorum. This move would pave the way for Palpatine's rise to power, but it did nothing to save Naboo in the immediate crisis. Realizing that the Republic would not act in time, Queen Amidala took matters into her own hands. She returned to Naboo with a daring plan: to unite the Naboo and the Gungans in a final decisive battle against the Federation. With the help of her loyal handmaidens, the Jedi and Captain Panaka, Amidala sought out the Gungan leader Boss Ruger Nass in the hidden Gungan sacred place. There she did something no Naboo monarch had done before. She knelt before Boss Nass and formally asked for his help. This act of humility bridged the ancient divide between their peoples, and for the first time in history, the Naboo and the Gungans stood united against a common enemy. The Battle of Naboo was fought on two fronts. On the grassy plains, the Gungan Grand Army, led by General Seal and Jar Jar Binks, launched a massive diversionary assault against the Federation's droid forces. Meanwhile, Queen Amidala led a strike team into Theed, with the goal of capturing Viceroy Gunray and deactivating the droid control system. In orbit, young Anakin Skywalker, against all odds, found himself inside the cockpit of an N-1 starfighter. Whether by accident or by the will of the Force, he flew into the heart of the Trade Federation's droid control ship and destroyed it from within. With the control system disabled, the entire droid army shut down, leaving the Federation completely defenseless. Simultaneously, in the Palace of Theed, Queen Amidala and her forces stormed the throne room, forcing Gunray's surrender. Naboo was free. But the battle came at a cost. In the depths of Theed, Qui-Gon Jinn and Obi-Wan Kenobi faced a Sith Lord, Darth Maul. The duel was intense, unlike anything seen in generations. Though Obi-Wan ultimately defeated Maul, Qui-Gon was mortally wounded, leaving Obi-Wan to fulfill his dying wish to train Anakin Skywalker as a Jedi. With the Federation defeated and the Jedi Council now aware of the return of the Sith, Naboo celebrated its liberation with a grand peace ceremony, where Queen Amidala and Boss Nass stood side by side, signaling a new era of unity between the Naboo and the Gungans. However, the true victor of this conflict remained hidden in the shadows. Sheev Palpatine, having played both sides to perfection, was elected as the new Supreme Chancellor of the Republic. While Naboo rejoiced, the galaxy had unknowingly set itself on a course toward war, dictatorship, and the fall of democracy. The Battle of Naboo was won, but the greater war was only beginning. The Clone Wars and the Fall of the Republic, 22 BB to 19 BB. With the Battle of Naboo behind it, the planet entered a brief period of peace. The Gungans and the Naboo, once divided, had established a newfound unity, symbolized by the continued cooperation between Queen Padme Amidala and Boss Nass. However, the events that had transpired on Naboo had set into motion a chain of events that would lead to the largest war the galaxy had seen in millennia. The Republic, once a beacon of diplomacy, was now on a slow but inevitable march toward war, and Naboo would once again find itself at the center of history. With the election of Sheev Palpatine as Supreme Chancellor, Naboo gained unprecedented influence in galactic politics. Though publicly seen as a benevolent leader, Palpatine continued to manipulate the Republic from the shadows, furthering his Sith agenda. He carefully expanded executive powers, preparing for the day when he could discard the Senate and rule unopposed. However, opposition to his growing authority also began to form, with one of the most vocal critics being Senator Padme Amidala. In 25 BBY, Padme Amidala stepped down as Queen of Naboo but remained deeply involved in galactic politics, successfully being elected as Naboo's senator in the Galactic Republic. She used her new position to advocate for diplomacy over militarization, often opposing the growing calls to create a Republic army. Alongside her closest allies, including Bail Organa of Alderaan, she worked to find peaceful solutions to the Republic's conflicts. However, despite Amidala's efforts, war became inevitable. In 24 BBY, discontent among the Republic's Outer Rim worlds led to the formation of the Confederacy of Independent Systems, CIS, also known as the Separatists. This movement, led by the former Jedi Count Dooku, sought to break away from the Republic, claiming it had become too corrupt. Naboo, being a mid-rim world, remained loyal to the Republic, but the war that followed would have devastating consequences for the planet and its people. In 22 BBY, the Clone Wars erupted when Separatist forces attacked the Republic on Geonosis. As war spread across the galaxy, Naboo became an important target, both for its symbolic status as Palpatine's homeworld and its strategic value as a mid-rim power. Despite its importance, Naboo remained one of the few Republic worlds that never hosted a major battle during the Clone Wars. This was largely due to Palpatine's careful maneuvering. While publicly a defender of the Republic, he worked in secret to ensure that Naboo was spared from the worst of the war. However, that did not mean the planet was free from danger. One of the most significant moments of the war for Naboo came in 21 BBY, when the planet was nearly devastated by a separatist bioweapon. The scientist Dr. Nuvo Vindi, working for the Separatists, developed a deadly blue shadow virus, an airborne biological agent capable of killing millions in hours. Vindi's hidden laboratory beneath the eastern swamps of Naboo was discovered just in time by Republic forces, and a Jedi strike team led by Anakin Skywalker, Obi-Wan Kenobi, and Ahsoka Tano managed to prevent the virus from being released into Naboo's atmosphere. Though the mission was successful, it reinforced the reality that Naboo was not safe from the dangers of the war. Throughout the war, Senator Amidala continued to fight against the militarization of the Republic, believing that peace could still be achieved. However, her efforts became more difficult as the Republic's policies became increasingly authoritarian under Palpatine's rule. Many of Naboo's citizens began to question whether the Republic they had joined centuries ago was still the force for peace they had believed in. As the war neared its end in 19 BBY, Naboo became a focal point once again, but for reasons far more personal than strategic. Padme Amidala, now secretly married to Anakin Skywalker, became pregnant, an event that would have profound consequences not only for Naboo but for the galaxy. Meanwhile, Palpatine, now at the height of his power, orchestrated the fall of the Jedi and the rise of the Galactic Empire. When Palpatine declared himself Emperor, the Republic ceased to exist and the Clone Wars came to an end. The Jedi Order was destroyed, and Anakin Skywalker, Naboo's own liberator from decades earlier, was corrupted into Darth Vader. Tragically, Padme Amidala did not live to see the new empire. Following the destruction of the Jedi and Anakin's fall, she was brought to Palas Masa, where she gave birth to Luke and Leia Skywalker. Her final words were a whispered belief that there was still good in Anakin. Shortly after, she died under mysterious circumstances, with her body showing no physical injuries. Many suspected that Palpatine himself had a hand in her death, though the truth was never revealed. Padme's body was returned to Naboo, where she was given a state funeral in Theed attended by thousands of mourners. Her death was a defining moment for Naboo, marking the end of its era as a symbol of peace and democracy. As her funeral procession moved through the streets, her body was visibly still carrying her pregnancy, a deception meant to hide the existence of her children from the newly formed. With Palpatine now ruling as Emperor and Darth Vader enforcing his will, Naboo had fallen under Imperial control. Though the planet had survived the Clone Wars without being devastated like so many others, its loss was far deeper. The Republic it had fought for was gone, replaced by a dictatorship controlled by its own native son. The Queen it had loved was dead, and in her place an empire ruled through fear and oppression. Naboo had entered one of its darkest chapters, but its story was far from over. Beneath the surface, resistance to the Empire would begin to grow, and one day, the people of Naboo would rise again.